I'm sure a majority of independent pro wrestlers have romanticized the idea of being the journeyman. Pro wrestling being your full-time job, you wake up, you hit the gym, you make the next town, and that's all you got to worry about because we love it so much. So in the lead up to that, before we can really make those full-time paydays, we often see people working absolutely everywhere and anywhere who will put them on a live card. And although there is some merit to the old school saying of just take every single booking you can, I'm here to be the devil's advocate today, and we're going to look at 4 different things that can go wrong if you're not being selective with your bookings. So for those who are newer to the game, maybe they've just made their debut, they're starting to work around the place, and they're still training consistently week on week, then yeah, often I will say take every booking you can. Still be smart about your dealings, still try to approach them with a level of professionalism. But at this point, you really want to get those reps in front of a live audience, and not just with shows that are tippy top promotions in your city, but even taking lesser bookings where maybe the quality isn't quite there can actually be a benefit to you and your game. I feel like as important as it is to train at a reputable school with a reputable coach, getting that constant source of feedback, there does come a point in time where that is a limiting factor. You need to be able to apply those skills and that awareness and knowledge in front of a live audience, because essentially the purpose of pro wrestling is to get a reaction, and your technique may be flawless, but if you can't control the crowd, if you can't change the pacing, the structure, the story, the psychology of the match on the fly, then you aren't really embodying what a professional wrestler truly is. However, as I said, lots of downsides can occur as well. Lots of downsides that I personally have encountered in my career. The first one, the main one, is injury. And yeah, we accept that injury is part of the game, but I do resonate with this one personally. And do I have a story to tell? About 10 or so years into my career, I'd already traveled overseas a couple of times, built up a bit of equity in Australia, but I accepted a booking on what could be considered a lesser show. A show that maybe wasn't well attended, that the quality wasn't quite there. And I accepted the booking for no payment, no fee. They weren't paying their wrestlers at that time. I was cool with that because I had a visitor from overseas who I was friends with, who I wanted to get a booking. And the time period when this visitor was here, unfortunately, it was the only show going on in the area. So I felt like I wanted to get them a match. I wanted to wrestle them in the match. So I just kind of took it on the chin. Now, the very first move of the match, I hit a drop kick. They landed awkwardly on my leg somehow, and I got a grade 2 tear of my medial collateral ligament. A really, really rough injury. To this day, probably the worst I've ever had, which put me out of action for 2 months before I could do anything in the ring. Now, the big issue with that was timing. The next morning, I was scheduled to fly to Melbourne. I was supposed to wrestle at the Melbourne International Comedy Festival. By all reports, I believe there was up to 2,000 people there. So I lost out on a fantastic experience. I lost out on a payday. I ended up losing money because of it. I also had an upcoming WWE tryout. Now, unfortunately, I was unable to train for that tryout. I couldn't really put any weight on the leg, so my training was minimized. I was still able to make the tryout. I was still able to perform pretty well, I thought. I wasn't very limited by it, but it was certainly a stressful situation where, I thought this one booking I took that had seemingly no real upside has cost me money, has cost me opportunities, and has potentially changed my career heading into the future. If you're enjoying these videos and want to support me in making bigger and better content just like this, make sure you head over to my worldbeaterwrestling.com Patreon. It's a community for pro wrestlers, current and aspiring, a place of networking, collaboration, and exclusive learning content to help you on your pro wrestling journey. Anyway, back to the video. The second reason why you should be skeptical about taking any booking is overexposure. And we do see it all the time where some people just appear on every single show in a city. You can see them, doesn't matter where you go. Now, I don't believe the argument of someone's not going to come to this show because they can see you elsewhere. I don't really feel like that's a real thing. If, let's say, we're looking at a lesser promotion and you're accepting a booking on that lesser promotion, I feel like it's up to the bigger, more grandiose, more reputable promotions to still be able to draw no matter what. And it's not like your one booking you take elsewhere is going to take an entire fan base over that one side. However, in my past life as a booker and from my experience working with bookers and promoters in multiple different companies, I've seen many times where two wrestlers who are very similar, very matched up skill-wise, very suited for the same kind of role, and one gets prioritized over the other because they are more exclusive. Maybe they're only working for that promotion, or you can't see them that much. So they feel like something special. So it's just something to keep in mind. Figure out whether you value getting booked in a certain promotion or whether you just want to get those reps in and get more live event experience. The third one is being undervalued, and let's face it, on a lot of these smaller shows, the pay might not quite be as good as others. They're not generating as much revenue, so you might get paid less. And you kind of accept that when you take the booking. You're happy to take lower pay because it's more about the experience. You're investing in yourself. However, another story that I have encountered in my time is that if a promoter gets wind that so-and-so and so-and-so are getting paid $20 for this promotion, and then they come over to their side and suddenly they're asking for $150, it can build a little bit of ill will, and you may end up having to cut your pay just a little bit in other promotions as well. Now, finances should be private. It's private dealings between wrestlers and promoters. Be professional about it. But it's something I have seen happen before, something to keep in mind if the financial side is something that you are concerned with. And the last one to be mindful of is the reputation of the promotions you're working with. Perhaps by taking a booking with a smaller promotion who are willing to work with you, maybe they're unprofessional in their dealings. Maybe they don't have the right insurance. Maybe they're not working well with venues, and they're, potentially burning out professional wrestling as an industry because now venue A, B, and C don't want to work with wrestling companies anymore. Maybe they're not professional with their dealings with other wrestlers. By you working for them, you are enabling them. You're keeping them in business, because if everyone checked out and said no, they wouldn't have a company anymore. So this is one where I say really exercise caution, regardless of whether you're in it for the reps, for the money, for the exposure. If you are enabling promotions to stay alive and they don't have any business being in the professional wrestling business, then you are part of the problem. So there's a few things to think about. Again, it's kind of up to you and figuring out what your values are and what you want to prioritize at any given moment. And I don't think there's a right or a wrong answer here. If you value being paid and being respected and getting what you're worth, then I don't think there's any issue at all with declining bookings and saying no to promotions, even if you are quite early in the game. But there's always going to be that trade-off. So you figure out what's best for you, what you really want to value and prioritize, and work towards that. So there's a few things to think about. Ultimately, it comes down to you and what you're valuing and prioritizing. Only you can determine where you take your career, and you live with the consequences either way. There's always going to be a trade-off. There's always going to be pros and cons to every single approach. But for me, if your number one reason for working everywhere all the time is just because you want to cosplay being a full-time independent wrestler, that's just not the right intention, and you can end up shooting yourself and others around you in the foot in the process. So let me know what you think. What are your perspectives on the topic, or what have you learned in your own career? Drop it in the comments box below. If you're here on YouTube, make sure you hit the like and subscribe button, ring that notification bell so you can stay up to date with these videos every single week. And of course, if you want the videos a week early and ad-free, as well as a range of other exclusive content to help you upskill in professional wrestling, head to worldbeaterwrestling.com. This is my Patreon. We have over 100 members at the moment who are learning from each other and myself every single day. I'll see you next week for another episode of World Beater Wrestling.